I was born on Huntley Drive and spent most of my youth there. Although I now live a few thousand miles away, nostalgia keeps me interested in the area. In an earlier video, I explored the Hull Daily Mail's newspaper's archives and built a picture of life on the drive from its development in the early 1930s through to 1950, which was as far as the archive went at that time. The newspaper archive has since been expanded to include issues through to 1999, so I am now able to continue the story of life on the drive from 1951 through to the end of the 20th century. To keep things manageable, this video will cover the period from 1950 to 1970, and a follow-up video will cover the period 1971 to 1999. I've provided links to the first video in the description on this screen, and I'll add links to the third video once it is released. As I step through the many stories, if there's an article you want to read in full, I suggest you simply pause the video to give yourself time to read it on the screen. The early 1950s was still a time of austerity as the nation struggled to get back on its feet in the aftermath of the war. A shortage of steel triggered a nationwide scrap drive. The Hull Daily Mail published an appeal for the collection of scrap metal in January 1952, and in April that year, Margaret Wanless, at number 10 Huntley Drive, received a prize for her efforts in the Hull scrap drive. The Savage family at number 57 lost 5 rows of pearls and offered a reward for their return in January 1953. I don't know if they had any luck getting them back, though I imagine there would have been more of a chance of their return back then than there would be today. Notice that I'm placing a small blue dot next to each house mentioned in an article. I thought it might be interesting to see how many houses in total merited a mention in the papers. June 1953 saw the city's inaugural cycling proficiency test for schoolchildren. 12-year-old Heather Neal of 36 Huntley Drive placed third in the girls section. By 1960, when I took the test, the scheme was called the National Cycling Proficiency Test. Any schoolchild wishing to come to school on their bicycle was required to pass the test first. The badge seen here is the one I was awarded. Everyone who passed got this badge and a handlebar-mounted plaque, but I have no idea what happened to my plaque. In October 1955, the Edinburgh Yorkshire Society held their annual dinner, hosted by their honorary secretary, Mrs. P. R. Thompson, daughter of George Rowe, number 31 Huntley Drive. The evening was described as, and I quote, "a reet good do." Also in October that year, Leslie Mitchell, number 37, was witness to a fatal traffic accident. A motorcyclist attempted to overtake 2 cars on Priory Road, but clipped the curb and died from the resulting fall. Robert Palmer was the father of Mrs. Young of 81 Huntley Drive. He was the postmaster of Brigg in Lincolnshire, a position he had held for some 5 years when, on the 3rd of December 1957, he vanished. A large-scale search in and around Brigg failed to find him. Then, on the 18th, he was seen by an acquaintance on the New Holland to Hull ferry. The person who saw him had been on vacation and was not aware of the disappearance, so thought nothing of it until later. Eventually, Robert turned up at his daughter's house, claiming memory loss and no recollection of his movements during the nearly 3 weeks of his absence. The next article is rather long, so I've only shown the headline. Basically, Wilf Crowder of number 17 turned up for work at Carmichael's jewellery store and found the place had been ransacked. A burglar broke in through a small window on the roof and made off with a suitcase full of booty. 2 enterprising young girls, Carol Pitts, aged 11, of number 1 Huntley Drive, and Eileen Dawson of 1 Murrayfield Road, organised a sale of toys, dolls and books. They raised 30 shillings and 6 pence, which they requested be used to send 2 old people on a day's outing that they would not otherwise have been able to afford. Truck driver Jack Pepper of number 69 was involved in an accident in Beverley in which his vehicle mounted the pavement and knocked over a pedestrian. At the Beverley Petty Sessional Court in December 1958, he pleaded guilty to driving without due care and was fined £5 and had his licence endorsed. Jack Pepper's father, Wilf, also lived at number 69. In his younger days, Wilf had been a boxer of some renown and was known locally by his nickname, Tiger, a reference to his tenacity in the ring. A work-related accident in 1940 cut short his boxing career and left him unable to perform any kind of manual work. He received disability payments, but appears to have supplemented his income by bookmaking at horse race meetings around the area. In October 1959, he became annoyed when his pick, Jack's Choice, a 7-4 favourite, was well beaten by a horse that, in recent meetings, had performed badly. Tiger suspected race fixing and was not shy about voicing his opinion. The article in the paper is quite long, and I've only shown the headline and an accompanying photograph. The same article also contains a photograph of Tiger from his boxing days. In 1928, at the age of 17, Wilf was out of work when he saw an advertisement for young men to compete in a battle royale at Hull's White City. He found himself in the ring with 5 other fighters at the same time. At the finish, Tiger was the last man standing, and thus began his 12-year, 100-fight career. Thomas Nicholson, at number 43, was the secretary of the Hull Citizens Advice Bureau for 12 years before retiring in August of 1960. However, he did not completely break all ties with the Bureau, as he would continue to act as an honorary advisor. He was also the treasurer of the Hull branch of the Save the Children Fund. Wilf Tiger Pepper was back in the news in March 1961 with an application for a betting shop license at 35 Flinton Street. Jill Fletcher from number 65, along with 2 other girls, Gwyneth Wright and Anne Wrigglesworth, raised 10 shillings for the Mother Humber Fund in 1962. A year later, Jill was collecting again. This time she organised a jumble sale and raised 32 shillings for the Freedom from Hunger Fund. The Neal family at number 36 were mentioned when their daughter Heather gained a Master of Arts honours degree in history at Edinburgh University. In November 1967, George Rowe, at number 31, launched a search for a gold locket that had once belonged to his late wife, Irene. He had given the locket to her in 1921 before they were married. It contained photographs and a lock of her hair. I knew the Rowes, but I don't know if the locket was ever found. In March 1968, Gordon Fairfield, at number 38, achieved success in the Chartered Institute of Secretaries Intermediate Examination, and 4 years later he passed stage 2 of the 3-part final exam. The Newells, at number 29, found a lost puppy. In September 1968, 67-year-old Robert Rowe of 45 Huntley Drive went out for a walk and did not return. His wife notified the police and a search was initiated. A hat belonging to Mr. Rowe was found floating in Princess Dock. The dock was searched and a body was recovered. At a coroner's inquest a week later, it was confirmed that the body found in the dock was indeed that of Robert Rowe. Apparently, he died of a heart attack while in a barge moored in the dock and was probably dead before he hit the water. In December 1969, Glynis Newell became one of 3 ladies chosen to publicise the advantages of rail travel. In particular, travel on the Hull, Bridlington, Scarborough line, which was in decline at that time. 2 weeks later, at the start of the new year, the 3 ladies, dressed in smart red uniforms, set about their business, travelling the line and visiting shopping centres, housing estates and other public places to promote the use of the rail service. In March 1970, 11 gypsy caravans appeared on the woolsheds. Residents of Huntley Drive and Murrayfield Road were quick to complain to both the police and the corporation. Bert Gilliard of number 79, which backs onto the land, said, "We want them off. They should not be so close to our houses. They are right on the doorsteps." Now, while mere proximity might not have been enough of a concern to make the corporation consider eviction, the lack of water and sanitation on the site was. Notices were served and the encampment moved on without incident. My neighbour at number 25, Eleanor Hewitt, was the welfare officer for the Hull and District Spastic Society and was in charge of a daycare centre in Cottingham. For 10 years, she had also served as a nurse for the 16th East Hull Handicapped Scout Troop, and in April 1970, she took on additional responsibilities when she was appointed as County Advisor for Scouting. The family announcements section of the Hull Daily Mail reports births, engagements, weddings, and deaths, amongst other things. It's not a free service, which might explain why I could not find any births mentioned during this period, despite the fact I was born in the 1950s, as were several of my friends. But instead, let's begin by looking at engagements and weddings. On May the 11th, 1959, Audrey Harrison of 41 Huntley Drive married Trevor Smith. Audrey's father, Frederick, was the deputy clerk to the Hull City Justices, and the happy couple honeymooned in Switzerland. On August 27, 1965, Richard Jefferson at number 28 became engaged to Rita Gray. Later that same year, Janet Wright at number 7 announced her engagement to Dennis Hudson. I don't know if the Parkinson family who lived at number 13 was superstitious, but in the announcement of the marriage of their daughter Margaret in July 1967, their address is shown as number 11A. Maureen Dawson, at number 8, married Kenneth McFarland on December 9, 1969. The opposite side of the coin to marriage is, of course, divorce, and in August 1970, Mary Gittings of 43 Huntley Drive was granted a decree nisi against William Gittings on the grounds of adultery. Of course, there are also deaths. Percival Williamson, age 63, Harriet Whitron, age 70, Herbert Normanton, age 63, Lily Johnson, age 63, Lily Zaff, age 78, Sheila Starkey, aged 59, Agnes Campbell, age 50, Martha Mould, age 75, Martha Knowles, age 65, George Jefferson, aged 79, Maud Normanton, age 71, Ernest Parkinson, age 79, William Matson, age 69, Annie Gilliard, age 73, James Sheridan, age 77, Elizabeth Hewitson, age 79, Robert Rowe, age 67, Harriet Hodgson, aged 87, Percy Darby, age 78. Of the 19 deaths reported so far, I knew some of the people, and I was probably vaguely aware of most of the others. But from my teenage perspective, they were all old people, so their death was not a surprise to me. However, the next death hit close to home. Brian Whitron lived at number 89. Although he wasn't a regular member of the crowd I hung out with, we all knew him and liked him. He was a few years older than me, but he was always very friendly, a really nice guy. So it was with great sorrow that we learned of his death in a traffic accident, just a few days after his 21st birthday. He was driving a car involved in a head-on collision with a lorry on Boothbury Road near Howden. He and the front seat passenger were both killed. In other news, some of the drive's inhabitants were keen to express their opinions in letters to the editor. In March 1951, Nancy Train of number 21 wrote decrying the processing and adulteration of flour in particular and food in general. She was an advocate for the use of 100% whole wheat flour. I live next door to Mrs. Train and can attest to the fact that she was always baking something, and her kitchen smelled wonderful. I was lucky enough to taste some of her creations, and they were always delicious. John Adamson from number 9 was a radio officer in the Merchant Navy and wrote to complain about a cleric nicknamed the Red Dean, who seemed to be causing disruptions at docks in Sydney, Australia. I must confess I'm not exactly sure why this should be of concern to people in Hull, but there you go. Tommy Reinhardt at number 25 had a beef with newfangled TV sets, which he blamed for causing a high-pitched whistling sound when he tried to listen to long-wave radio. Some of the drive's inhabitants were involved in court cases. Tiger Pepper must have been supplementing his bookmaking endeavours by working as a taxi driver because, In May 1952, he was found guilty of dangerous driving when his taxi was in collision with another taxi. He had 4 passengers, the other taxi had 2 passengers, and all 6 were slightly injured in the crash. He was fined a total of £7.12, the equivalent to around £275 in 2025 terms. In September 1961, Beatrice Barton of number 49 was fined £20 for shoplifting. In February 1962, Tiger Pepper was in court again. He was fined £2 for a parking offence. Duncan Campbell from number 9 was fined £15 for speeding at 50 miles per hour along Springbank West. Herbert Ward of number 33 pleaded guilty to careless driving. He collided with a scooter at the junction of Goddard Ave and Newland Ave. In January 1966, a 17-year-old girl was charged with stealing a bottle of perfume from Boots on King Edward Street. She claimed she simply forgot to pay, and she was given an absolute discharge, but had to pay £2 costs. Now, I should mention here that I do not wish to cause any embarrassment to anyone still living. The girl mentioned in this article was 17 years old in 1966. I know she doesn't live on the drive now, but she could still be alive somewhere, so I've redacted her name and address. In happier news, Mrs. Clegg of 5 Huntley Drive won £4 in the Davis of Bond Street Christmas cake competition. For many years, playing Find the Ball was a weekly ritual. Readers were presented with a photograph from a football match with the ball airbrushed out. The idea was to mark the picture with an X where you thought the centre of the ball would be. I think you were allowed 10 guesses. Clip the picture, mail it in, then wait with fingers crossed to see if you'd won. The first prize of £400 was significant, being equivalent to something like £10,000 today. Although no one on the drive hit the jackpot in the 3 decades covered by this video, 4 lucky households received £5 consolation prizes. I've marked the houses with pound signs. In searching the archives, I found many personal sales ads. I've not attempted to document them because, in addition to the sheer volume, they are quite repetitive. I also found many house for sale ads, but again, I'll spare you those details. And that brings me to the end of Huntley Drive in the News, 1959 to 1970. Of the 69 houses on the drive, a total of 41 merited a mention in the news. There were 20 bereavements across 16 houses. 5 engagements and weddings occurred, and 5 households had dealings with the courts. I hope you've enjoyed my trip down memory lane, or perhaps I should say down memory drive. I'm working on the next part of the story, which will take us through to the end of the 20th century. I'll add a link here when it becomes available. Thank you for watching.